The scent of old paper and lukewarm tea hung heavy in the administrative offices of Hangzhou University, a familiar comfort that usually lulled me into a sense of quiet contentment. My name is Chen Zhu, and at 28, I'd found my rhythm here, nestled deep within the bureaucratic labyrinth. I handled student records, managed course registrations, and basically made sure the gears of this massive academic machine kept turning smoothly. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was predictable, and for a long time that had been enough. I considered myself an observer, a quiet presence. I saw the patterns, the subtle shifts in the university's pulse. I watched the students arrive each semester, a vibrant, hopeful wave, and I watched some of them leave, their dreams either fulfilled or crushed. And I had certainly observed, with a growing sense of unease, the way certain students, particularly those from wealthy, influential families, often foreign with powerful connections, seemed to glide through our system, untouched by the rules that bound everyone else. They were like oil on water, always separating, never truly mixing, and rarely held accountable. This observation had been a slow-burning ember in my chest, a quiet frustration that I'd learned to live with, compartmentalizing it away from my daily tasks. Then Li Wei entered my orbit. She was a scholarship student, 19 years old, from a small village nestled deep in the mountains of Sichuan. Her file was immaculate, her grades exemplary. She was quiet, almost invisible, diligent, and possessed a quiet determination that shone in her eyes when she came to my desk with a query about her transcript. She worked 2 part-time jobs on campus to support herself, always with a polite nod and a soft, barely audible thank you. She represented everything pure and hopeful about education, a stark contrast to the entitled arrogance I'd grown accustomed to seeing from certain other students. The problems started subtly, as they often do. Whispers first, then snickers. The group responsible was an affluent clique of foreign students, led by a young man named Stefan Clement, whose family owned a shipping empire in Northern Europe. Stefan had a sharp, predatory gaze and a condescending sneer that seemed permanently etched on his face. He and his hangers-on, mostly other scions of international wealth, considered themselves untouchable. They roamed the campus like kings, their laughter too loud, their demands too frequent, their respect for others practically non-existent. They saw Li Wei's quiet nature not as strength, but as an invitation to torment. It began with minor provocations, bumping into her in hallways, accidentally spilling coffee near her textbooks in the library, loud, mocking whispers in English that they knew she understood. Then it escalated. They started leaving crude drawings on her desk in the shared study hall, making animalistic noises when she walked past, throwing small, crumpled papers at her back during lectures. I saw her flinch sometimes, her shoulders drawing inward, her head bowing lower, but she never retaliated. She just bore it, clinging to her studies, hoping it would pass. It never did. It only grew bolder. One afternoon, a colleague from the Student Affairs office, an older woman named Ms. Liang, came to me, her face pale. She just had a meeting with Li Wei. Li Wei had finally, tearfully shown her the evidence. Stefan and his group had cornered her in the quietest part of the campus library, late at night. They had verbally abused her, calling her names, mocking her village accent, and demanding she give up her scholarship, saying she didn't belong at such a prestigious university. One of them, a girl named Anya, had deliberately poured a bottle of ink onto Li Wei's carefully handwritten research notes, smearing weeks of work. Li Wei, trembling but remarkably brave, had recorded the entire incident on her phone. The audio was clear, the taunts, the threats, the cruel laughter, the splash of the ink, it was all there. Ms. Liang was shaken. This was harassment, plain and simple, and there was undeniable evidence. She immediately escalated it to her department head, Mr. Zhou, a man known for his caution and his eagerness to avoid any situation that might reflect poorly on the university's international image. I overheard snippets of their conversation later that day. Mr. Zhou was already talking about cultural misunderstandings and private mediation. He seemed more concerned with the fallout from powerful parents than with the suffering of a vulnerable student. That familiar ember in my chest began to glow hotter. Li Wei, despite her evidence, was advised to consider an amicable resolution. The university's initial approach was not justice, but damage control. They wanted to sweep it under the rug, offer Li Wei some minor compensation, perhaps move her dorm room, and issue a gentle warning to Stefan and his group. The thought of it made my stomach churn. I saw the pattern again, clearer than ever. The privileged would walk away, unscarred, ready to find their next victim, and the brave, principled ones like Li Wei would be left to pick up the pieces, alone. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying Ms. Liang's distressed voice, the images of Li Wei's quiet suffering, and the arrogant sneer of Stefan Clement. It wasn't just about Li Wei anymore. It was about every time I'd seen this happen, every minor injustice ignored, every powerful family's influence overriding common sense and basic decency. My role as a quiet observer, I realized, was no longer enough. I knew the system, I knew the cracks, and I knew how to navigate the bureaucratic maze. For the first time, my quiet job felt like a weapon, or at least, a powerful tool. A cold resolve settled over me. I wasn't going to stand by. I wasn't going to let them twist this into a minor incident. This was an opportunity, a clear-cut case, and I was going to ensure that true accountability was enforced. My plan wouldn't involve grand gestures or public confrontations. It would be a slow, methodical dismantling, piece by piece, from the inside. If you appreciate stories of quiet determination and justice served, then you should definitely subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, difficult path, but I felt a strange sense of purpose, a quiet hum beneath my skin. Stefan Clement and his group had no idea that their victim had an unexpected, internal ally. They were about to learn that sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones no one notices at all. The days that followed were a blur of meticulous observation and quiet maneuvering. My first step was reconnaissance. I spent my lunch breaks poring over the university's disciplinary code, not just the public version, but the internal guidelines, the appendices, the clauses that were rarely invoked. I memorized the precise language used for harassment, academic misconduct, and conduct detrimental to the university's reputation. The legalistic jargon, once merely dry text, now read like a battle plan. I realized how many loopholes Mr. Zhou and his ilk exploited, how often they relied on vague wording to escape truly difficult decisions. My goal was to make it impossible for them to be vague this time. My next move involved Mr. Zhou's office. I knew his assistant, a frazzled young woman named Xiao Li, often left important documents piled precariously on her desk when she went for her afternoon coffee. One day, I accidentally knocked over a stack of files near her desk, a move that earned me a mild reprimand, but also a fleeting moment to glimpse the file on Li Wei's case. It confirmed my fears. The initial report had been downplayed, Li Wei's strong evidence summarized into a vague dispute, and the proposed resolution was indeed just a slap on the wrist for Stefan, a formal verbal warning, nothing more. My anger flared anew, but I kept my face impassive. I needed to make sure Li Wei's evidence was properly catalogued, securely stored, and undeniably presented at the right time. The audio recording was key. I knew that audio evidence, if not properly authenticated and documented, could be easily dismissed as hearsay or manipulated. So I recommended to Ms. Liang, in a casual hallway conversation, that she immediately submit the original audio file to the university's IT department for an official timestamp and integrity check, citing a recent, entirely fictitious incident where an important file had gone missing. Ms. Liang, ever diligent, took my suggestions seriously. The IT department, oblivious to my true motives, processed it promptly, creating an unassailable digital record. The real challenge lay in the upcoming disciplinary hearing. Mr. Zhou was pushing for a closed-door meeting, minimal attendees, and a quick resolution. This would allow him to control the narrative completely. My objective was to force a more transparent, formal process, one where the evidence would have to be publicly acknowledged and the rules strictly followed. I started by subtly reminding certain colleagues in the dean's office, specifically those who had a reputation for strict adherence to procedure, even if they were generally timid, about the university's written policy regarding serious student conduct violations. I'd bring up obscure clauses about the necessity of a full investigative committee for cases involving severe harassment and reputational damage. I'd leave printouts of these policies on shared printers, highlighted in yellow, as if I'd been studying them for a different case. It was like planting seeds in a garden. I knew some would take root. One afternoon, I was making my rounds, delivering some printed course schedules, when I overheard Stefan Clement openly boasting in the student lounge. He was on a video call with someone, his voice loud and arrogant. "My dad's already pulling strings," he sneered, puffing out his chest. "This whole thing with the little scholarship girl, it's nothing. A few words, a bit of money, and it'll all disappear. They're too afraid of my family's donation to actually do anything serious. This university needs our money more than they need some peasant student." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made my blood run cold. He was right, of course, about the money. That was the primary obstacle. But he was also dangerously overconfident. His arrogance was his greatest weakness, and I planned to exploit it. This public boast, delivered so casually, was another piece of the puzzle. I discreetly made a mental note of the time and who else was within earshot, not that I'd use it directly, but it confirmed the depth of his contempt and sense of impunity. First major hurdle arrived in the form of a formal letter from Stefan's family lawyer, sent directly to the university president. It was a thinly veiled threat of a lawsuit, alleging defamation against Stefan and his group, and demanding that Li Wei retract her accusations. The letter was designed to intimidate, to make the university hierarchy buckle under pressure. Mr. Zhou, predictably, wanted to immediately issue a statement minimizing the incident and effectively silencing Li Wei. But I had anticipated this. In a staff meeting where this letter was discussed, I innocently brought up an old, forgotten university guideline. "Didn't we once have a policy," I asked, feigning absent-mindedness, "about how all external legal correspondence related to student conduct must be reviewed by the university's general council, not just department heads, to ensure full compliance with national education laws?" My question seemed so innocuous, but it subtly forced Mr. Zhou's hand. He couldn't refuse without appearing to bypass proper procedure. The general counsel, a meticulous man named Lawyer Zhang, was known for his adherence to legal correctness, regardless of external pressures. He would examine the harassment case with a much more objective eye than Mr. Zhou. This was a small victory, but a significant one. Lawyer Zhang, as I'd hoped, reviewed everything. He noted the clear evidence, the documented pattern of behavior, and the severity of the harassment. His recommendation, leaked to me by a contact in the legal department, was that the university proceed with a formal, full-scale disciplinary hearing, complete with a panel, not just Mr. Zhou. This was precisely what I needed. It dragged the matter out into the light, away from the shadows where Mr. Zhou operated. The struggle was far from over. Stefan's parents were relentless. They flew to Hangzhou, demanding meetings with the university president. They threatened to pull their significant donations, to badmouth the university to other international families, to initiate a media smear campaign. The pressure on the administration was immense. I could feel the tension radiating from the higher offices, a palpable fear of financial loss and reputational damage. Li Wei, meanwhile, was crumbling under the weight of it all. She came to my office one afternoon, her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped. She had heard the rumors about Stefan's parents about the threats. "Maybe it's not worth it, Chen Ziu," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maybe I should just drop it. I just want to study. I want this to be over." My heart ached for her. Her spirit, once so resilient, was being slowly crushed. "Li Wei," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "you have done nothing wrong. You are the victim here and you have every right to seek justice. This is not just about you. It is about every student who has ever been bullied, every time power has tried to silence truth. You gathered undeniable evidence. We cannot let them win by intimidation." I offered her a cup of hot tea and listened patiently as she poured out her fears. I knew I couldn't promise her an easy path, but I could promise her that she wouldn't be alone in this fight. This was more than just a case now, it was a crusade. The thought of them escaping accountability, simply because they had money and influence, fueled my resolve. I remembered Stefan's boast in the lounge, his utter certainty that he was above the law. His arrogance was a vulnerability, and I was going to ensure it was his undoing. This quiet, internal struggle was exhausting, a constant mental chess match, but the alternative, watching an innocent student be trampled, was unthinkable. If you're captivated by the intricate dance of justice against power, remember to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The game was intensifying, and I, Chen Ziu, was ready for the next move. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, tucked away in a sterile conference room on the top floor of the administration building. The air was thick with tension, palpable even to me, a mere administrator, as I navigated the hallways that day. This wasn't just another procedural meeting, It was the crucible where Li Wei's fate, and perhaps the university's integrity, would be forged. The committee was comprised of 5 individuals. Mr. Zhou, looking perpetually anxious; Lawyer Zhang, sharp-eyed and inscrutable; a stern professor from the law school, the head of student welfare; and a representative from the International Students' Office, who seemed particularly keen on minimizing any negative impact on foreign student recruitment. It was a careful balance of power, precisely what I had aimed for by subtly pushing for a formal committee. Stefan Clement and his core group of accomplices, Anya and 2 others whose names I barely remembered, sat opposite Li Wei. Stefan, predictably, exuded an air of bored condescension, occasionally glancing at his expensive wristwatch. His parents, accompanying him, sat rigidly, their expressions a mixture of fury and entitlement. Li Wei sat alone, small and vulnerable, but her posture, though still timid, held a new, quiet dignity. I knew she was terrified, but she was also determined. The proceedings began with Mr. Zhou outlining the allegations, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He tried to present it as a misunderstanding, a clash of personalities. But Lawyer Zhang quickly cut him off, asserting the need to review the evidence in full. This was my signal. I had previously helped the IT department prepare the technical setup for the hearing, ensuring that Li Wei's audio recording would play flawlessly, with crystal clear fidelity. When the audio began, the room fell silent. Li Wei's trembling voice, barely audible at first, was soon drowned out by Stefan's loud, mocking laughter, his callous insults, Anya's sneering comments, and then the distinct sound of liquid splashing, followed by a triumphant, cruel cheer from the group. It was raw, undeniable, and deeply disturbing. Stefan's parents blanched, their confident postures deflating slightly. Stefan himself, for the first time, looked uncomfortable, a flicker of panic in his eyes. But the general counsel wasn't finished. Lawyer Zhang had received a tip-off, from whom, he didn't know, but it was me. I had left an anonymous, carefully worded note on his desk, subtly referencing an obscure clause in the university's code of conduct regarding witness tampering and attempts to obstruct justice. It was the perfect leverage. Mr. Clement, Lawyer Zhang's voice was calm, cutting through the silence. The committee has also received information regarding attempts by you and your family to pressure Ms. Li Wei into retracting her statement, including threats of legal action and financial repercussions against her scholarship. Stefan bristled. That's a lie. My family merely sought to resolve a trivial matter privately. Indeed, Lawyer Zhang continued, unperturbed. But we have also been informed of your public boasts, Mr. Clement. Specifically, a conversation overheard on campus where you openly stated that your family's donations would ensure the university did nothing serious about this incident, and that Li Wei was a peasant student who didn't belong here. This hit Stefan like a physical blow. His face went scarlet. He glanced at his parents, who looked furious. This wasn't just about harassment anymore. It was about contempt for the institution, an open admission of attempting to subvert justice through financial influence. My anonymous tip, bolstered by the truth of Stefan's arrogant, unguarded personality, had struck its target. I had made sure that a few trusted, less timid students, who had indeed overheard Stefan's boast, were subtly encouraged to report it to the dean's office, knowing it would eventually reach Lawyer Zhang. The committee went into a private deliberation. The tension outside the room was excruciating. Li Wei sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the closed door. Stefan's parents began a heated, hushed argument with their son. I stood in a quiet corner, observing, my heart pounding. When the door finally opened, Mr. Zhou's face was grave. He cleared his throat, his gaze avoiding Stefan's family. The committee has reached a unanimous decision, he announced, his voice lacking its usual bureaucratic drone. Based on the overwhelming and irrefutable evidence presented, including the audio recording of the harassment incident, and considering Mr. Clement's documented attempts to obstruct the university's investigation through intimidation and financial leverage, the committee finds Mr. Stefan Clement and Ms. Anya Petrova, along with their 2 associates, in severe violation of the university's code of conduct, specifically sections pertaining to student harassment, academic integrity, and conduct detrimental to the university's reputation. A collective gasp went through the small waiting area. Stefan's mother let out a small, choked cry. Effective immediately, Mr. Joe continued, his voice gaining a surprising firmness. Mr. Clement, Ms. Petrova, and their associates are expelled from Hangzhou University. Their visas will be revoked, and their academic records will reflect this disciplinary action, making re-enrollment at any reputable institution highly unlikely. Furthermore, the university will issue a public statement reaffirming its commitment to student safety and zero tolerance for harassment and undue influence. Stefan jumped to his feet, enraged. You can't do this. My family will sue. We will destroy this university. Lawyer Zhang stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. Mr. Clement, your family is certainly free to pursue any legal avenues they deem appropriate. However, the university has meticulously documented all evidence, all procedures, and your own public statements. Any legal challenge will only serve to further publicize your actions and those of your family. I suggest you reconsider. Stefan, for the first time, looked truly defeated, his face pale with shock and fury. His parents, speechless, could only stare at their son, their dreams of his prestigious degree crumbling before their eyes. The public statement would be the final, devastating blow to their reputation. It would ensure that this incident, and their son's misconduct, would follow them wherever they went. Li Wei, her eyes wide, slowly looked up at me. A faint, tremulous smile touched her lips, a fragile blossom of relief and vindication. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was done. The system, with a quiet nudge from within, had finally worked as it should. The principle of accountability had triumphed over privilege. My part in this remained invisible, a phantom hand guiding justice. No one would ever know the precise extent of my involvement, and that was exactly how I wanted it. My satisfaction wasn't in personal glory, but in the quiet knowledge that I had stood for something, that I had helped restore a semblance of balance in a world that often tilted dangerously towards the powerful. Stefan Clement, the boy who thought he was untouchable, was gone. His arrogance, his belief that money could buy anything had led to his downfall. He had walked into his own trap, and I had simply made sure the door clicked shut behind him. The university, stung by the initial bad publicity but ultimately strengthened by its firm stance, had been forced to face its own vulnerabilities, and in doing so, had emerged with renewed integrity. Li Wei, after the initial shock wore off, returned to her studies with a newfound confidence. She walked taller, her eyes no longer downcast. She knew she had fought for herself, and for others like her, and she had won. Sometimes the quietest victories are the most profound. She would graduate, I knew, and she would carry that strength with her. And me, I returned to my desk, the scent of old paper and lukewarm tea a comforting presence once more. My work hadn't changed, but my perspective had. I was still an observer, but now I was also a quiet guardian, always watching, always ready to nudge the scales of justice when they wavered. The embers in my chest had cooled, replaced by a quiet, deep satisfaction. Justice, in its own slow, methodical way, had been served. It was a powerful reminder that even the smallest gear in a large machine can, with careful timing and precise application, change the entire course of its operation. This might be the end of Stefan Clement's story here, but for anyone who loves intricate tales of quiet strategy and ultimate vindication, I urge you to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.